If you're a kid, please make note of this. It's for your own good.
My power allows me to communicate telepathically without the system's assistance.
Greetings, Professor. Nothing to report.
I didn't have that many upcoming games I was really looking forward to initially. I do get why this was the case, as the game industry is likely trying to cooperate with one another through you-know-what, not to mention the entire world, but at the same time, it's a bummer that exciting releases were that sparse. I mean, there was excitement I have for Balan Wonderworld, but the demo ended up boring me, and it's so sad to see what has transpired with that game at launch, and what happened afterwards, so I had to look elsewhere. But now, this is no longer the case. There's now a ton I'm looking forward to. One of which is the subject of today's video, Scarlet Nexus, a new game brought to us by Bandai Namco using Unreal Engine 4, which they also used to make Code Vein, and will be using to make Tales of Arise. Based on impressions I got from the trailers, it definitely looked like a Namco game that was using Unreal Engine 4, but I'm totally okay with that, because I was reminded a lot of several Platinum game styles just seeing it in action, especially Astral Chain and Nier Automata. From the setup, to the setting, to how the game played, I really got excited for this title, because it looked like it was going to be as fun as I come to expect from games like these, even though Platinum Games had nothing to do with this. Not to mention, even though it is multi-console except for Switch, it became one of my reasons for getting a PS5, which I am using to record footage from this demo. Seriously though, I'm really impressed with this console so far. So now that I've tried this demo out, is my hype going to be reassured? The short answer is yes. From what this demo gave me, I think it's very much on the right track. There's a lot that really enticed me, and gave me some ideas for what could be in the final game. First thing that caught my interest is the choice between one of two protagonists, Yuito Sumeragi and Kasane Randall. They each have their own personality quirks, Yuito being inspired by being saved at a young age from an oncoming threat, honestly saying that out loud just reminded me a lot of Promare, and Kasane being willing to do anything for her sister, and has grown an indifference towards others. There is the general idea as to what they'll be like in the final game, being pretty standard, but overall still likable and well-meaning. But given the setup of them working with a task force assigned with dealing with monsters from another dimension, known as Others, and the fact that they were given psychic powers through sciencey means present here, the details are likely being skimmed over, and these two will likely be fleshed out and given some sort of harsh catch. With stories like these, there's always a catch. In fact, I would not be surprised if someone who helped them, or the commander behind the task force they're working for, the Other Suppression Force, is actually a bad guy. Regardless, it has a good setup, and regardless if it's actually predictable in the end, I just hope it's engaging. As for giving either one to choose at the beginning, I imagine the way the story will present itself will be a lot like Sonic Adventure or Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, in that you just choose one character and play their campaign until the credits roll, and both campaigns will likely be required to get the full story. So in that scenario, I think it'd be neat if they had their own routes, or even their own levels to make the experience feel fresh. And since trailers for the game clearly show the two interacting with one another despite never doing so in this demo, their stories are likely going to intertwine with one another, so I hope both of their campaigns will repeat as few things as possible in terms of levels, story beats, and all that. Would make exploring them all the more enjoyable. These levels overall do get the job done, but for the most part, they are pretty linear. The game isn't railroading you in any way, but most of the extra goodies off the beaten path are just some useful one-use items or a tougher enemy encounter. I'm overall okay with this, but if you're expecting to really explore this environment to find whatever trinkets you want to, or just absorb the scenery from any angle you wish, you might be disappointed in that regard. Personally, I do hope there will be some more explorable environments, as I'm interested in this world, and I want to know more about why things are like this. But I don't necessarily feel like I'm locked to a set path. And besides, I'm cool with the extra enemy encounters because the combat system of this game is great. There's a ton of mechanics that make combat sequences so diverse and interesting, but it also does a great job teaching you how it all works, so it's easy to just jump in and have a great time. The psychokinesis easily showcases what it can do, as it's easily the most interesting part of it all. Sure, it may seem like you can just grab and throw things at a base level, until you realize you can use them in conjunction with light and heavy attacks in order to have an easier time exposing enemy weak points, and just keep combos going in general. The game heavily encourages this, as it makes enemies go down much easier, and you have a meter that dictates how much you can use this power, so if you want that meter to go up, then you gotta get aggressive. But it doesn't stop there. There can be much larger objects that you can use against enemies that require more button pressing time, but can be used to cause even more damage, even insta-kill if you get the quick time event just right. Side note, this is the only time these are used, and honestly, I think they are implemented really well. With this ability, it's very important to study the arena you are fighting in, and use resources wisely. One more thing, since I'm playing this on the PS5, and since its power is to map to the L2 and R2 buttons, the game uses the adaptive triggers to make this power more satisfying. Honestly, I'm impressed with how this game uses those triggers. Makes me wonder how using them in the other versions of the game feels. On top of that, and the melee weapons, your character can get an extra bit of power from one of their 4 party members through a process called SAS, which can include imbuing their attacks with fire or electricity, allowing them to see invisible enemies, or straight up going invisible. Even though there's not a whole lot of differences between Yuito and Kasane at base level, the powers they get through their party members picks up the slack big time. There's a unique use for all of these, and it provides more approaches to fights and level traversal. And since this is partly an RPG, some of these enemies have elemental weaknesses, but they're handled a little differently. In order to be weak to an element, the target has to have some sort of trait or an ailment that allows it. Like in order to be weak to fire, the target has to be covered in oil, and in order to be weak to electricity, the target has to be wet. Things like that. Honestly, I like this take on weaknesses, as it provides much more strategy to triggering them aside from just wailing away with the weakness element, like in most RPGs out there. Not to mention, it gives each party member more purpose even when they're not fighting with you on the field. And proper usage of it can lead to the game letting you perform a move that instantly kills the enemy you just stunned, which will be useful into building your drive meter and activating Brain Drive form. When Brain Drive form is active, you attack faster with both normal moves and Sega power, and the latter consumes less of its respective meter. I overall really like this form, as it really is a fun reward for playing well. That said, I kinda wish you weren't forced into it upon a full meter and weren't stuck with it until it runs out. I think being able to activate and deactivate it whenever, like the Devil Trigger in Devil May Cry or the Umbran Climax in Bayonetta 2, would have made the mechanic feel a lot more integral and fulfilling, or at the very least the ability to back out of it at any time to save the meter for a later fight. Heck, I can freely enter and exit SAS connections at any time, so why not the Brain Drive too? I mean, the fact that the drive meter drains much more slowly whenever you're not fighting is nice, but I think being able to freely choose when you want to be in it would be a lot better. And continuing the RPG idea, there's a lot more staples here that I think are great additions. An equipment system that allows you to customize your stat and appearance loadout, one-use items to help you in a pinch, and perhaps my favorite one of the lot, growth being dictated by a skill tree system. You've got a couple that are just stat increases, but most of them are new moves or boons that flesh you out a little more, like increasing your equipment slots, allowing you to have more than one SAS connection to be active, or allowing your psychokinesis meter to be charged through other means than just attacking. It's all dictated by how much BP you have, and I'm not sure how to get more of it, so I don't know how it will be in the final game. But even so, I really like this for diversifying each character and allowing you to pick your playstyle, on top of making the growth feel very natural rather than artificial. That's a lot to work with, but the game makes it all feel very natural, and everything just flows together. As a result, the combat is always fun to do. Part of the reason why I wanted to explore the levels was just so I can go into fights that I don't need to fight. That's how on board I am with it. And the boss that both Yuito and Kasane fight at the end is just great, for teaching you the mechanics of the game in a more rigorous fashion, and just being a tense and gratifying fight overall. Though I will say, it was a little distracting how they both fight this thing at the end. I really hope this recycling is not standard, because that will make the game slower for the wrong reasons. But if it's one thing I think this game has down, it's the visuals and art direction. This is a really pretty game. Despite the landmarks being the very definition of destroyed, the colors are just so vibrant and exude style, and the effects in battle from just swinging a weapon to using psychokinesis have these super stylized lines and particles that remind me a lot of Studio Trigger's work, and it is easier to appreciate it when the game runs as smooth as butter. No frame drops or stutters, no load times, it's a great spectacle. And that's what I think the game will be like when it hits store shelves. I do think this game could use some settings that are far less linear than what was provided here, as I really don't think hallway settings would fly with this gameplay style. I think the rising slash needs to be improved in terms of button layout, a bit of tinkering with the Brain Drive form would be good to have, and I hope both characters get more SAS connections than what they have here. But aside from those, I really had a good time with this demo. It constantly remains fast and frantic, and it presents a lot of great ideas that I hope the final game would take advantage of. I love to see how much further they go with this combat, and how much they'll explore the RPG elements through story and world building. The game set the bar high, so let's see if it'll follow through. I'm the Lightning Ripper, and I'm so happy I got a PS5.